Hi, my name is Jim Vieira. I wanted to share some of my research about the mysteries of ancient America in stone. I'm a stonemason by trade, and I've been so for about 25 years. I studied economics at the University of Massachusetts, became interested in ancient Native American stonework quite a while ago. And, I spent about 25 years researching Native American stonework in the country and fancy myself a historical detective. So I wanted to share some of my findings and, leave it to the audience to, think what they want about this, to see if it makes sense that Native people built with stone in the eastern half of the country. We know in some states they certainly did, but in New England, the archaeological paradigm is that Native Americans didn't build ancient structures with stone. So I'll present a lot of examples that I think can help overturn that current way of thinking. So one of the things I have done with my brother is build a series of stone towers and stone constructions all around my town in Asheville, Massachusetts. These are some of the ones we've built. These 12-foot high towers. We built 3 of them on the property here, as you see. And there's about 15 tons of stone to create one of these. And basically, we live near a quarry, so there's a lot of weathered, really nice stone to build with. I built a stone tower at the power lines down the road. So when I'm not doing stonework, I'm doing stonework. Here's one in the field near the place that I live on Bug Hill Road, one of the oldest roads in the county in Asheville, Massachusetts. And, it's a very satisfying activity to build with stone. I could see why ancient peoples, did that and worked together collectively to create things that have a fair amount of permanence. Some of the other stonework we've done is this 1,000 square foot patio at the Monadnock School in New Hampshire we built. We built this pool structure and stairs and patio in Vermont. In Florence, Massachusetts, we built this egg-shaped fountain, and we had to dig out the infrastructure to make the fountain. And my brother took a diamond-tipped saw and carved that bird bath, if you will, out of a solid piece of asphalt stone, which is neat. And here is a construction we built at the Land Trust in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts. Really beautiful asphalt stone. And we just completed this arch at a friend's house, which came out rather nice, I think. It's the first arch we built. And here it looks like in the winter. And my friend just snapped this picture with the deer here. And we also have been building several miles of stone walls, or rebuilding them, on Bug Hill Road. As you see, we've put these together, and in the middle, we completed this fairly recently, where we put in these huge lintels so the water can flow through, and we kind of brought them back to the state that they existed 200 years ago. So one thing that really got me interested in who created the stone ruins of New England, we know that colonists built an enormous amount of stonework, including 250,000 miles of stone walls, which is extraordinary feat. But being an avid hiker and a stonemason, out in the woods I started to find structures that didn't fit that belief that I had that colonists built everything at the time. And I would start to find structures like these, stone turtles, stone serpents. And this is on a 20-foot glacial erratic in the Holly State Forest. And the last 5 stones were about a ton apiece. They're chalked up on both sides, and it really appears that the builders chose an anthropomorphized snake figure for the last stone. And on the road I live, actually, out in the woods, I found this turtle. I uncovered the fin, and it was actually purposely placed here. I'm not saying the stone was, but after the fact, I think, we know that Native peoples took these structures and turned them into anthropomorphic forms. Like here, it really looks like a turtle with the teeth and the eye. So there are other structures around New England that clearly look like turtles that take the shape of these stone cairns built on top of on rocks. Now, a lot of these are considered farmers' clearing piles. I tend to think that's really not the case. Native people had a different way of viewing nature and viewing the nature of existence, and often worked with the landscape to create a ceremonial landscape. And I know a lot of people in the United States, they don't have the deep roots that tie them to the land like other cultures. And I think a lot of people look to native wisdom to kind of make sense of their lives. And you know, I know myself, when I enter the woods, it's like my blood pressure just goes down. It's a really, just a great way to experience life, is to be out in nature and to be with the elements. So we know in other parts of the country, like in Wisconsin, that native people built stone effigies out of, you know, in the forms of turtles and serpents. This one is from Wisconsin. And frankly, all around the eastern half of the United States, in burial mounds, like in Iowa, there's an arched tomb with the skeleton that was found inside. In Dunleith, Illinois, this long stone passageway with capstones leads to a crypt that was uncovered by Smithsonian ethnology scientists in the late 1800s. Here's another one from Wisconsin here. These stone constructions with inside burial mounds. Here's an Ohio mound that was 30 feet tall. And this one here is particularly fascinating. In 1838, there was a 55-foot stone mound in Newark, Ohio, that was taken apart by colonists to build a dam, which is just a massive construction, and a 182-foot base. And when they got to the bottom, they recorded 7 enormous skeletons found. And in fact, the dam ended up being obsolete. So they destroyed this, could just imagine, a 55-foot high stone pyramid, if you will, in Ohio. And it was taken down to the ground. But luckily, it was cataloged by the antiquarians of the time. In Adams, Ohio, here's just a regular stone mound that was built by Native Americans. And you see many of these in New England, but frankly, they're just dismissed as colonial land clearing piles. Here's another one in Ohio, a burial mound. There's also a series of stone forts that existed in Tennessee, in Illinois, in Indiana, in Ohio, all around the Midwestern states. Some people thought they were oriented around defensive positions. Some archaeologists think they were ceremonial in nature, but whatever the case, they were these massive constructions. Like this one at the Old Stone Fort in Tennessee, it took 500 years to build. And the natives took the stone from down in the Duck River and brought it all the way up to create this really incredible structure that I visited while we were doing one of our shows. And I got to talk to the superintendent of the land there, and he told me that it was completely precise solar orientation, and that the site also has equinox orientations. The Native Americans really had a thing for orienting their sites around the cycles of the moon and the earth and the sun. Here's another stone fort at Fort Hill in Ohio. Like you have stone forts in Europe and Germany and in England, you had stone forts all around the hilltops of the Midwest. Here's another example of Spruce Hill in Ohio. And here's a reconstruction of one of these stone forts with massive walls in Ohio. Really astounding construction. So we have burial chambers in many states in the eastern United States. And when you get into New England, these structures that I will show, they were often considered to be root cellars or some kind of colonial construction that isn't native. But we know here that in Missouri, the Kurtz Mound and other places up till Wisconsin, we have these ancient burial sites that they found cremation, they found bones, they found ceremonial artifacts. Let's get to one here. And here's the Kurtz Mound again. So this is native construction. A lot of people don't know about this. It seems pretty straightforward that you would think that it would be accepted Native Americans built with stonework in New England, but apparently the archaeologists don't think so. Here's another one at the Brenner Mounds. These are all in Missouri. And here's another one that looks like the interior of a stone chamber that I will show you in a minute. I found this on a postcard on eBay, if you can believe it, and it's in Maine, a place that's not supposed to have any native stonework, and it's an Indian mound at the Forks in Maine. And there are two passageways, and it's a huge stone mound. I find it rather interesting that this was available online in a postcard form. Now, in New England, there's hundreds of stone chambers, and there's three different theories on who built them. Either that they're colonial artifacts that kind of got lost to the mists of time, that they are Native American ceremonial structures like sweat lodges, or that wandering Celts built them. That's one of the main theories. I tend to think that's the toughest one to prove and the furthest reach. I really think they're either Native American or colonial. I tend to think Native, but you need to find archaeological evidence and context. And a lot of these places, not only aren't they preserved, but they were never excavated. And this one is in Goshen, Massachusetts, near my hometown. And it's a really fascinating construction. As you see, there's like 12 massive interlocking stones, and there's 2 columns that support the whole structure internally. So it's a feat of engineering that's rather precise and very impressive. I was there in 2011, and one of the interesting facts of these stone chambers is a lot of them are oriented to the winter solstice sunrises and sunsets and the equinox sunrises and sunsets. So I came in the winter, I was in the middle of the chamber, and I saw nothing. So then I came back in March of 2011 for the equinox, and at 6 in the morning, right through the center of the chamber, came this shaft of light. So it was my Indiana Jones moment. It was really, whatever these are, I had this inspiration to continue to study these structures. I really found it compelling and fascinating. And here's an interesting one in Stockbridge, Mass. Now, what's notable about this is these are considered root cellars, which doesn't make a lot of sense because roots rot really quickly in them. And as you'll see here, you got to crawl into this space, and there is a hole in the roof, and it doesn't make any sense. It makes sense as far as a sweat lodge is concerned or some other construction. One thing I found, I've been through hundreds of sites around New England. I've poured through all the records, and I've never found a colonial report of the construction of one of these. Like, oh yeah, my great-great-great-grandfather built it to put the sheep in or something like that. In all the records, I'm like the Rain Man. I can't take care of my basic needs, but I can go through vast volumes of information. And, I've never found a colonial account that said that colonists built these structures. Now, that doesn't make it so. Once again, you need archaeological evidence in context, but I found rather interesting information that supports the idea that Native Americans built these structures. Like right here, November 30th, 1654, John Pynchon, founder of Springfield, Mass., wrote Winthrop Jr., the man who would become Connecticut's first governor and first scientist. This is what he wrote. This is in Old English, kind of the old speak here. Sir, I hear of a stone wall and a strong fort in it, made all of stone, which is newly discovered at or near Pequot. That's near New London. I would be glad to know the truth of it from yourself, hearing many strange reports about it. So in 1654, the colonists showed up at what is believed to be this ancient site of Gunjiwamp, and they reported these pre-existing stone structures, which really leans towards them being, pre-colonial in nature and probably Native American. Here's another report. Notes to Weekakas Hill on Mohegan's Watchtower Tombstone, 1769. This is written by Mr. Hyde of Norwich, and it's reproduced in the Archaeological Bulletin of Connecticut. Aged people whose fathers remembered the days of Uncas, who was this massive native chief. The fort upon this hill was a large square building erected in the Indian manner of unpolished stone without mortar and banked with earth. The remains of this structure have been visible until only a few years ago. It probably stood in good repair in the days of Uncas. So another report that really indicates that. And though more than 130 years have passed since that time, but for the depredations of those who wished to enclose their farms with stone fences, it might have stood firmly to the present day. That's another thing that's occurred, that colonists took apart a lot of these ancient stone structures and turned them into barns and foundations. And I don't blame them in one way. Pragmatically, the stone is right there, but on the other hand, you're taking apart these ancient stone structures. So we have a lot of reports like this that indicate a native construction for these structures. And here is Gunjiwamp, the place that Winthrop wrote about in Connecticut. Now, I visited this place, and it's a really fascinating amalgamation of stone entities. There's numerous stone chambers, and this one in particular is noted because it has a shaftway of light, a passageway, where the equinox sunset passes through twice a year. And there was a researcher in there in 1988, I believe, who noticed that by accident while he was looking in the stone chamber. We also have this double concentric ring at the site, and many other oddities out in the woods in Connecticut. And I remember when I was visiting there, I was talking to the landowner, and we were talking for a few minutes, and then I realized we were on like a 100-foot long, 20-foot high stone pile. And we kind of, at the same time, noticed, we said, do you realize we're on this massive stone mound right now? And we kind of both laughed about it, and we got off and looked at it. And the site is littered with these ancient stone mounds that basically have been covered over now. So this is a particularly interesting account because I think it solidly verifies that we have ancient native stonework in New England. Now, this is from Lockmere, New Hampshire. Also, this site was taken apart to build a dam that was later obsolete in New Hampshire. But before then, Squire and Davis were two surveyors for the Smithsonian. This is what they had to say. So, E.G. Squire, Antiquities of the State of New York, the Smithsonian Contributions to Knowledge in 1851. There are some remains in the state of New Hampshire which, whatever their origin, are entitled to notice. The subjoined plan of one of these is a sketch from 1822 made by Jacob Moore, Esquire, late librarian of the Historical Society of New York, who has also furnished the accompanying description. According to your request, I send the enclosed sketch and memorandum of an ancient fortification supposed to have been the work of the Pennacock Indians, a once powerful tribe whose chief sat on the neighborhood of Concord, New Hampshire. And the report goes on to say that there were trees growing through the structure when the colonists showed up, and there was Indian artifacts found everywhere in the structure itself. So a real strong proof that Native Americans were building these structures at the time. And here are more of these stone chambers I talked about. This is in Shutesbury, Mass. It's called the Monk's Cave. This is in Peru, Massachusetts. A very, very, really expert construction. There are 10 roof stones that are massive in this, really well put together. And there's no mortar in this. There's no tool marks or anything that would indicate colonial construction. And at America's Stonehenge, we have the site called Mystery Hill. And it's kind of an outlier. I don't know who built it. There were different theories about Phoenicians and ancient peoples. I don't know what to make of the site other than it's a really outrageous stone construction. And my co-author Hugh Newman and I visited this site. We filmed here. We spoke with Dennis Stone, who owns the site, and it's really fascinating. If you get a chance to visit it, it's in New Salem, New Hampshire, called Mystery Hill. And what you have here is these chambers built with blocks of 15 and 20 ton stone. You have really intricate stonework everywhere, and it's just a massive complex that you wouldn't expect in colonial New England. This site is probably the most compelling stone chamber in New England. It's called Calendar II. It was talked about by Byron Dix and James Maver in the book called Manitou, and they believed that there was native construction in New England. Now, this chamber has 7 roof stones, and they're up to 14 feet tall, and they weigh up to 3 tons apiece. And here's Byron Dix, and there's Dr. Barry Fell from Harvard analyzing this site. And in New Hampshire, you have other sites, stone chambers. You have in Upton, Massachusetts, probably the largest or tallest stone chamber, which is about 12 feet in height. And here is an early sites research bulletin that describes the site in Upton. Now check out some of these lintel stones, just an absolutely massive stone construction. And once again, it's just this outlier. Nobody really knows who built it. There's not a lot of firm evidence or information about it. And all around New England, you have these massive stone piles. Right here, my friend Norman Mueller, who worked for Princeton, he writes many articles, and he's a researcher of stone mysteries in New England for quite a while. You can find his articles online. But there's a site up in Rockingham, New Hampshire, where there's almost 100 of these massive stone piles that certainly don't look colonial in nature. There was a team of archaeologists and professionals who went up a couple of years ago, and they analyzed the site and really don't know what to make of it. And you see these really nice constructed mounds, if you will, all around New England. This is in Vermont. There's ones in Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts. This is at the Ole Hill site in Pennsylvania. It's about a 9-foot high stone tower. In fact, seeing this site inspired me to build stone towers all around my town. Here's another one from Ole Hills, really well constructed. If you were clearing your forest or your land, you certainly wouldn't build structures like this. This is a lot of work. Not like it's impossible by any means, but it's just a really absurd amount of work for a colonist who's trying to survive. And here's one in Rhode Island. And here is proof in New York State that Native Americans, built stone heaps. The site of the Indian stone heap, known to have existed in 1753, the route taken by Sir John Johnson. And at Monument Mountain in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, it's the site where Melville and Thoreau met. It's a really nice mountain of quartzite. At the bottom of it was this monument. They called it Monument Mountain. You see right here, it was 18 feet by 6. It was a native stone pile. And Ezra Stiles of Yale, the president of Yale, was interested in antiquities, and he documented this. And here's some more interesting stone mounds in Pennsylvania. This stone circle is in Heath, Massachusetts at Burnt Hill. And I visited this site many times, and there's a new owner who won't let anybody go to the land, but I was friends with Jack Cable, the old landowner, and we studied the site, and it's a really fascinating stone circle that looks over on, across like 3 states in western Massachusetts. It's a really fascinating site. In Shutesbury, Massachusetts, you have this strange construction. I don't even know what to make of it. It's been talked about being, possibly Native American, but nobody knows anything about it. And you find a lot of that, just lost in the woods of New England, these overgrown places that have these clearly man-made constructions. And New York State, a researcher sent me this picture that he found this ancient chamber that nobody knows about. And it's built in an arch-like fashion. It's a really great construction. So you have other megalithic mysteries in New England too, like this dolmen in New Salem. It's thought by geologists to possibly be natural, but when you go there, you see that it really looks like it's one of these dolmens like you find in Europe that were placed purposely by human hands. So what we know about native construction in New England is that it goes back at least to 8,200 years ago. At Lansomore in Labrador, the oldest burial mound in the country was found, and within it was a stone cyst with the child's crypt. I'll talk more about this here. And here's James Tuck and the other excavators in the 70s. They excavated the stone mound. They found maritime archaic tools. The maritime archaic, or the red paint people, were a very sophisticated native civilization that lived 10,000 years ago on the coast of Maine and Labrador. They traveled extensively. They went out and they fished for cod and swordfish in the brutal, cold North Atlantic. So they were hardy and sophisticated people. And they built stone cairns and other stone structures. So the dating of the Lansomore burial mound makes it one of the oldest known sites in Labrador. It was far older than expected. The 2 oldest radiocarbon dates from the site, 8042 and 8363 thousand years ago, suggest that the site was constructed more than 8,000 years ago. And there is James Tuck, who led the site in the investigation. Here's a doctor who lives, a doctor of archaeology, who lives up in Labrador. And one thing I like to do is read through the old historical accounts to see what was happening, what people were reporting. And this is a particularly interesting one here. Dr. McHenry of Quebec, who spent the last summer in Labrador, he writes in Archaeological Weekly that he found many important evidences of the presence of Northmen. His belief was that the Vikings showed up and built this. So one cairn in particular, the stones of which were so heavy as to divide the assaults of Indians or bears, they forced open with gunpowder, and they found a gigantic human skull, breastplate, and brass-bound shield. The breastplate, though much rusted, bore signs of an inscription of legend. Failing to decipher which, he sent it to Copenhagen to see if it could be made out by the American archaeologists there. So they blew open this cairn, the Stone Mound in Labrador, and they found a giant skull and, you know, a breastplate. It's a really interesting twist in the story. About 15 years ago, Dr. Mark Hawley at Northwestern Michigan University, he's an underwater archaeologist, and he found what he believes is a Stonehenge-like structure 40 feet below Lake Michigan. And there's a lot been made of the story and further investigations, but it's a really fascinating story. We know that above land you have stone constructions in the area, but beneath the waves of Lake Michigan, Dr. Hawley believes that not only is there a stone circle, but there is a mastodon carved on the stone, which I'll show you in a second, one of the standing stones. Here's Mark Hawley right here. And if this is the case, then this site could be 10, 12, 15,000 years old, this stone circle underneath Lake Michigan. So you see right here that what he believes is a mastodon carving on the stone. And this, it doesn't look like much. It's murky waters in Lake Halliburton on Ontario, but I'll tell you the story. I spoke with the geologist at the site who said the following about the find underwater. So Halliburton Forest engages services of an underwater archaeologist to examine the structure. Before diving, he explained that so far he had never encountered man-made rock cairns which were stabilized without the help of shim stones. If he found these, it would convince him of the man-made structure, not natural origin. So after a 30-minute dive, the rock assembly closely and carefully and taking pictures, the expert emerged with the unequivocal conclusion the existence of 3 shims was proof to him that the assembly of now 7 rocks was the result of human activity and not a fluke of nature. So subsequently, Halliburton Forest turned to the services of a statistician to calculate the probability of 7 rocks falling on top of each other, creating a structure. Albeit difficult to access, he reported back that even 4 rocks creating a natural structure was almost unattainable, but that the probability of 7 rocks hitting at the same time was virtually impossible. So basically, the conclusion is this stone structure with a 1-ton capstone was built over 7,000 years ago, and now it's underneath the water. So when it was dry, native people built that structure over 7,000 years ago. So a recent find by archaeologists from the University of Michigan talks about more stonework under Lake Huron. There was a series of stone construction found. They discovered sophisticated prehistoric stone walls deep beneath the surface of Lake Huron that give the clearest portrait yet of the mysterious people who lived in the Great Lakes region at the end of the last ice age. It's just way more complex than anything we've seen before, said John O'Shea, the U of M archaeologist who published his findings in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. Historical Collections of the State of Pennsylvania is another account. The following notice of curiosities in Crawford County is from New York Journal of Commerce in 1830. This is a really interesting account. On an extensive plain, there was a vast mound of stones containing several 100,000 cartloads. This pyramid has stood through so many ages that it has become covered with soil. The stones are many of them, so large that 2 men can barely can move them with difficulty, and yet they are unlike any in the neighborhood. Oceana Pharmacy. This is a very cool account. An ancient race of native people built a vast series of huge dams across the Clear Fork River. The evidence of such ancient structures and a theory of the construction so intrigued Isaac Christian that he published in a newspaper the following report. The ruins of the ancient stone dams, which had been found in various places in Wyoming, McDowell, Boone, and Raleigh counties in West Virginia, are at the present time attracting no small amount of attention from scientific archaeologists. During the last 2 months, over 50 men under the management of Professor Jones have been making excavations in this country for the purpose of more thoroughly investigating these obscure works of what was certainly one of the most ancient races of the human family. The great antiquity of the mound builders in North America is well known. The remains left by the antedating The great antiquity of the mound builders in North America is well known. The remains left by them, antedating by several thousand years, anything yet found in the Eastern world. But even back in the prehistoric ages of the mound builders, these dams were there, and now only crumbling ruins left behind by a still more ancient people. The fact was clearly proved by excavations made about 2 weeks ago on George Cook's land, 1 mile below Oceana in West Virginia, where it was found that one of the largest mounds to have been built right over the foundation of one of these dams. These 17 dams in their original condition extended entirely across the valleys of the streams from one hill to the other, and according to very conservative estimates made by Colonel Irwin, were in many cases over 100 foot high and 200 feet at the width of their base. 17 dams of that size is really outrageous. And in fact, I found old accounts of dams in Iowa and Ohio and other places, ancient dams that were, obliterated over time. So the question is, what was going on in ancient America that would, have native people doing this kind of construction? It's quite a story. Now, this is from a Smithsonian Ethnology report. These are structures in West Virginia here. You have, these cairn-like structures. You have 8 to 10 miles of walls on Mount Armstrong and Mount Carbon in West Virginia. In Fayette County, near the present-day community of Mount Carbon, on a ridge on Armstrong Mountain, between Armstrong and Loop Creeks, are the remains of an extensive prehistoric stone wall that enclosed a large area of more than 300 acres. Following the summit of Armstrong Mountain, the walls formed an irregular enclosure or pen. The walls were up to 6 feet in height, built on a base from 6 to 8 feet wide. This series of walls was 8 to 10 miles in length. And then another wall enclosing a large area of ground was located about 10 miles from Loop Creek Wall, located in the top of the mountain overlooking the Kanawha River at the mouth of the Paint Creek. Here's a still from the 50s. There's a coal company, I think, owns it, and they've destroyed a lot of these walls, but there was 8 to 10 feet of massive walls on these mountains in West Virginia. And in fact, this is an old lithograph by Seth Eastman of Eastman Kodak, I think 1854. And you see the ruins of one of the stone towers that was situated around the hills. And the Kanawha area is known for burial mounds and Smithsonian ethnology excavations that took place there and revealed many large skeletons, like Colonel Norris dug up a 7'6" skeleton in the 1880s. So you have this kind of ancient stone towers all around the site. Now at Cahokia, at Collinsville, Illinois, you have another megalithic mystery. This one from 1999. Now Cahokia is 100 foot high, built by the Mississippian people probably around 1200 AD. Just a massive complex, 22 million cubic feet of soil brought from several miles away to create this 4-step pyramid. Now, this is from the St. Louis Dispatch in 1998. Archaeologists have made an astonishing discovery at the Cahokia Mound State Historic Site. What appears to be a large stone structure beneath the site's biggest earthen mound. The site was discovered accidentally, January 24th, during drilling to construct a water drainage system within Monk's Mound, the largest Indian mound north of Mexico, and the largest earthen construction in the New World. This is astounding, said William Woods, an archaeologist with Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, who was leading the investigation of the mystery structure. It's so unprecedented that it would never have entered your mind before. The stone is at least 32 feet long in one of its dimensions. It is buried about 40 feet below the surface of a terrace on the western side of Monk's Mound. Even if the apparent structure turns out to be no larger than this, it would be a dramatic find. Stone does not occur naturally at Cahokia. So this is where it gets a little weird. Like, I always go to this place, but for me, I just comb through records. I don't theorize a lot. I just present things that are in the historical record, whether it's an ethnology report, an archaeology report, newspaper account of a farmer finding something. I just try to piece together these mysteries and let people decide what to think of them. This is an interesting account. So in Iowa, it says that while some workmen were engaged in excavating for the cellar of Governor Grimes' new building on the corner of Main and Valley Street, they came upon an arched vault some 10 feet square, which on being opened was found to contain 8 human skeletons of gigantic proportions. The walls of the vault were about 14 inches thick, well laid up with cement or indestructible mortar. The vault is about 6 feet deep from the base of the arch. The skeletons are in a good state of preservation, and we venture to say that they are the largest human remains ever found, being a little over 8 feet tall. So my co-author Hugh Newman and I have unearthed hundreds of these accounts, and it is what it is. It's the measurement of a stationary object, and make of it what you want, but it's utterly fascinating. And there are many of these stone vault accounts found in several places around the country. And here is Governor Grimes right now. You would figure he would say, you didn't find giant skeletons on my property. If it were the case, he was a well-respected governor. And here's another account right here in Ohio. A subterranean vault was discovered last week at Jackson, Ohio, in which the air was so impure that it was impossible for anyone to go down into it. By means of a rake, human bones of gigantic size have been raised, and a small chain of silver with coins attached to each end. The coins, though much defaced by time, have the appearance of those in use among the Romans in the days of Scipio Africanus, though they were evident traces of hieroglyphic devices that cannot be deciphered. So another wild account. And this is, we'll add to this account here. Now, first I'll tell the story, and then I'll give the background on this. So right here is the account from 1970. Highway builders beware of that supersized Indian. So the Ohio Messenger. Back in 1905, a county highway crew was working on Harmony Road when a large mound stood in their way. So they began to excavate the obstacle and soon uncovered a burial place containing 32 skeletons. Thurman Knox was the foreman and related to this story to C.H. Harris of the Messenger, telling him that the skeletons were more than 8 feet tall. He also told of the workers finding arrowheads and huge clay bowls used for cooking. Knox told Harris that when the bones of the 32 men were uncovered, all but one disintegrated to dust when exposed to air. One skeleton of a man between 8 and 9 feet tall was recovered almost intact. The jawbone, fitted with perfect teeth, was so large that it fitted over the face of a large man like a mask. Now, I'll turn away for a second and say that we've also found accounts like this all over the country, even in Europe, with these ancient skeletons being unearthed, and the jawbone is so massive it goes over the face of the finder, which that's not something that you can really get around. It's always like the largest man in town, fitted over his face. This isn't like, complex anthropology or skeletal measurements. It either is or it isn't massive, and this is what's being reported by respected people over and over again. The excavation at East Mill went down 15 feet, and in the center of the skeleton group was found a clay box-like structure about 6 feet wide, 12 feet long. It was never opened and now lies under the center of the road near the dairy. Knox ordered his men not to disturb the burial container, and the workers felt that it was probably held the bones of the chief. For 65 years, that chief has been alone. His companions in death long since departed from their previously secure resting place. So we located where this is. It's on a dead-end road. I'm always thinking of ideas because, I do different ancient mystery shows for the History Channel and other networks. And my brother and I kind of pinpointed this, that it's already been dug, so we can get an excavator in there and dig down 15 feet without disturbing the archaeological context and see if that, 6 by 12 stone chamber still exists. At that point, it's if we were able to find it, it'd be very interesting. Of course, the goal isn't to is to disturb ancient remains, but to kind of verify the nuts and bolts of the story, which is utterly fascinating and indicating a massive amount of skeletons over 8 feet tall. So I've encountered many of these different reports, and they're all telling this kind of different story than we're basically, I'm not going to say told, but we're taught archaeologically. And I understand that an archaeologist, anthropologist would say, oh, this is way out there, and show me the bones and things like that. I'm just pointing to all this evidence, all these people. We go and we meet the descendants of these people in these reports, and we interview them. And once again, it's credible people, measurements of a stationary object. Make of it what you want, but I find it thoroughly fascinating. And here is my last stone mystery account. This one from 1887. the Long Island Indians, and the Brooklyn Daily Eagle Almanac. So 1892. A remarkable discovery of Indian remains was made at Abaguque in 1879. A great number of graves were found, the bones in them being so far decayed as to fall to dust almost as soon as they were exposed to the air. The remains exhumed show a singular phenomena in the construction of the jaws and teeth, there being no molars or grinding teeth, and the existing teeth being fitted with interlocking points, which would give the jaws the fierce character of an alligator or a shark. The fragments of human skeletons found indicate a powerful race. The remains of a temple or structure of some kind, unlike anything associated with the historic Indians, was found. It had clay walls and it was about 9 by 10 feet in size, with a dividing wall across the middle. For what purpose it was constructed and who were the race of people associated with it remains a mystery. Another giant tomb found, this one in Long Island, New York, and associated with giant skeleton finds. So there's this I don't want to say conflation, but you know, these ideas of ancient sites and giant skeletons kind of permeate the folklore and the historical accounts of ancient America. And I'm always interested in a good story, and I'm not telling anybody what to believe. I just find these old accounts and, you know, basically mythological descriptions of the past really fascinating. Why were they conjured up? Why were people writing these things if they weren't true? You know, we look at so many ancient documents for the nuts and bolts measurements and dimensions and things like that. But when it comes to something that doesn't fit an anthropological or archaeological paradigm, they're completely dismissed. It's like Thomas Kuhn and the structure of scientific revolutions. Basically, there is no tolerance for anything that doesn't fit within the accepted paradigm. And I'm not a believer in academic conspiracies. I work with professionals and digs, and I have a lot of friends who are professionals. But I will say that when something doesn't fit the current paradigm, it just doesn't make the grade. It is just marginalized over and over again. So it's more the human ego is the conspiracy. Instead of being completely open-minded, and like a perceptual shift can make you think differently about a problem. Like, is anthropology got it right with evolution and us, you know, coming from Australopithecines and lower forms of the Homo genus? Or were humans, you know, engineered in a different way, if you will? Or could there be giants and little people like all the legends talk about? And could there be, you know, these races of native people who built outrageous stone structures all around the country? So, you know, once again, I like to throw these ideas out here. And, you know, to me, this whole arena of ancient mysteries has become like religion and politics, with people entrenched in different orientations. Now, it's, you know, you need science to verify fact. But I, you know, say that science should be more open-minded about these things and comb through the past, and we might have a lot of evidence hidden in plain sight, like the destruction of the Clovis Barrier or out of Africa, or all these golden calves of science that have fallen the last couple of decades. Let's be open-minded with these other investigations. So thanks for listening to me, and I hope that you find this subject as interesting as I do. And I will continue to investigate these mysteries and go to crazy places and say crazy things. And I thank you for your time.